religious pluralism, and then I'm gonna suggest some solutions to the problems of religious pluralism. So my presentation is gonna be philosophical, theological, rather than mainly historical. But the whole discussion is about, and I think, an interesting chapter of the intellectual history of the Baha'i faith, a chapter which is still going on. Okay, so what is religious pluralism? So religious pluralism is one explanation, of course one among few, concerning the phenomenon of religious diversity. So the phenomenon of religious diversity cries out for explanation. So we are witnessing a perplexingly diverse religions and denominations. How are we supposed to explain this supposedly irreducible diversity of religions? That's the key question. So one explanation is religious pluralism. But in order to better understand religious pluralism, let me contextualize it more in the sense that let me put it within other responses, so to have a big picture. So some other explanation are to the phenomenon, some responses to the phenomenon of religious diversity. One is atheism. According to atheists, since there is no God or ultimate reality, all religions are just natural falsities. So they should be interpreted purely naturalistic. The second explanation is agnosticism. According to agnostics, since we do not know whether or not God or ultimate reality exist, we do not know whether all or at least some religions are false or representing the presumably, the allegedly divine reality or ultimate reality. The other three responses, in one way or another, presupposes the existence of the divine or ultimate reality, but they differ in the way that they interpret the phenomenon of religious diversity. According to exclusivists, only one religion captures the divine truths, all others are totally false. According to inclusivists, although one religion captures the truths of the divine better, other religions are not entirely false, but they are not as true as the true religion. And the fifth response to the phenomenon of religious diversity, quite naturally, is pluralism. According to pluralists, all religions are equally valid paths to God or ultimate reality. Okay. Now, let's get into the religious pluralisms, actually different treatments of religious pluralism. Although world religions, especially Abrahamic religions, are usually interpreted exclusively, still all world religions have also been interpreted, at least marginally, in a pluralistic way. So just to make a list which is by no means exhaustive, in Christianity, for example, John Hick, as Sina just mentioned him, and Paul Nitter. In Judaism, Moses Mendelssohn. In Islam, Abdul Karim Surush. And in the Baha'i faith, Alan Locke have interpreted their religious traditions in a pluralistic way. So let me shortly focus on Alan Locke as, quote unquote, the most profound and important Western Baha'i philosopher to date. Okay, so in his 1944 article entitled Cultural Relativism and Ideological Peace, and few other articles, Locke explains cultural pluralism in terms of cultural relativism. So, Locke suggests three principles for understanding human cultures and their interrelationships. One is the principle of, he calls it, cultural equivalence, which puts more emphasis on cultural similarities than cultural differences. The second principle is cultural reciprocity, which blocks this superiority and inferiority relationship between cultures. And the third principle is limited cultural convertibility, which criticizes cultural engineering from the outside, especially from quote-unquote a superior culture. So it is claimed that cultural pluralism and cultural relativism have their foundation in the Baha'i principle of unity in diversity. So, almost with Lockean line of thought, Mujan Moomen, in his 1988 article entitled Relativism, a Basis for Baha'i Metaphysics, argues that the best way out of, on the one hand, absolutism, and on the other hand, conflicting truth claims of world religions is religious relativism. But Moomen is quick to add a caveat. Quote, the teachings of Baha'u'llah accept the relativist concept that man can have no access to absolute truth in the field of religion as in other fields. However, this does not mean that, quote-unquote, God is dead or ceases to act within the world, as the writings of some of those advocating relativism would assert, end quote. So, to put it another way, the worry that Moomen raises is that radical relativism is not in line with the Baha'i teachings, because radical relativism turns out to be either atheistic or non-theistic at least. So we are encountered with what can be called the challenge of radical pluralism or radical relativism. Here is a number of Baha'i studies scholars have taken this worry or challenge rather seriously. For example, Dan J. May, in his 1993 MA thesis entitled Baha'i Principle of Religious Unity and the Challenge of Radical Pluralism, and also in a 1997 article of him, he shares this worry. Quote, radical pluralism, quote from his thesis, MA thesis, radical pluralism as it applies to the study of religion holds that even after one employs the kind of perspectivism advocated by the Baha'i faith, there remains, quote-unquote, irreducible aspects, mutually incommensurable insights, and stubbornly different doctrines and worldviews in every religious tradition that cannot simply be reduced to some, quote-unquote, monolithic unity, intellectual abstraction, or ultimate reality, end quote. So here is my effort to formulate the challenge with which we are dealing now. Radical pluralism leads to radical relativism. We have just explained it, because if your radical pluralism thinks that different traditions are not commensurable, so everyone should stick with his or her tradition. So that here comes radical relativism. There is no other way. There is no way beyond each and every tradition to compare and contrast them. That is radical pluralism and the way it leads to radical relativism. The second premise of the formulation of the challenge of radical pluralism, relativism, is that radical relativism leads to incommensurability. So traditions cannot be compared and contrasted. So the third premise is that incommensurability goes against the commonality of truth. So the idea is that if the idea is common, so if the truth is accessible to each and everyone in principle, then each and every truth claims can be compared and contrasted with other truth claims. But if, each and every culture or religious tradition has its own truth claims that cannot be compared and contrasted with other cultures or religious traditions, therefore there is no such a thing as the commonality of truth. And the uncommonness of truth, i.e. the denial of the commonality of truth, goes against the transcendent unity of religion. And whatever goes against the transcendent unity of religion is not in line with the core Baha'i teachings. Therefore, radical pluralism is not in line with the core Baha'i teaching. Here is, of course, a formulation of the challenge of radical pluralism or radical relativism. Some scholars of the Baha'i faith, such as Grant Martin, have taken up this challenge, arguing that the Baha'i faith is a form of inclusivism. I don't have time. There is a kind of back and forth debate between Sina Fazal and between Grant Martin, a very interesting one, and I'm alluding to that debate. So what can be a solution, or at least a suggested solution to the challenge of radical pluralism or radical relativism? So, before going into the further details, let me put the question in this way. Is it possible to have advantages of pluralism, like being open toward other cultures, religious tolerance, and so on and so forth, while doing away with its disadvantages? I'll get to the disadvantages in a second. So I think there is a way. So one distinction might be very helpful here to show us a way out of this deadlock. And that distinction is between what is called alethic, truth-related pluralism, and salvific, i.e. salvation-related pluralism. And alethic religious pluralism seems problematic, because it seems paradoxical or self-destructive. And here is my effort to very briefly formulate the paradoxicality of or self-destructiveness of alethic pluralism. If alethic pluralism is true, then those religions supporting it are not as equally true as those that do not. Because when you take a truth claim position, you are denying other positions. That is just quite logical. If I say I'm here, I'm saying that it is not the case that I'm not here. So if I say alethic religious pluralism is true, I'm saying, quite logically speaking, it is not the case that the other positions that are not in line with alethic pluralism are true. Okay, so that is quite the logical implication of taking a truth claim related position. So if I am taking the alethic pluralistic position, I'm saying that those religions supporting alethic pluralism are not as equally true as others. Because those who take it to be the case are more true than those who do not. But if I take the other horn of the dilemma, saying that they are all equally true, then I haven't made any assertion. So then the one who supports exclusivism, who would say, if me as exclusivist and you as a pluralist, we are equally true, why should I abandon my position? Why should I become a pluralist? So elastic pluralism creates a dilemma. If we take it to be equally true, then you have not made an assertion. And if it is not equally true, rather those who take elastic pluralism to be true are right, and those who do not take it to be wrong, it is exactly against the elastic pluralism, because elastic pluralism would say any truth claim is as true as other any truth claim. So that position seems to be philosophically leads to a dilemma, and I don't think there is a way out of this dilemma. So therefore, elastic religious pluralism should be set aside. But what's the other way? So maybe salvific pluralism seems promising, and I think it does seem promising, because it is free from the theoretical difficulties attached to elastic pluralism. I've just alluded to one of them, and it is in line with the Baha'i teachings, and also it's in line with the Jewish and Christian teachings. Therefore, those who have sympathy with religious pluralism in other traditions, like in Christianity, Islamic, and Jewish tradition, they could also take the salvific pluralism. So just in a nutshell, so I think the combination of being alethically inclusivist and salvifically pluralist seems a way out of the difficulties of exclusivism on the one hand, and difficulties of radical pluralism, I mean alethic pluralism, on the other. Thank you.